Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on your location. We hope you're having a good day and you, as well as your family and loved ones, are doing well given the current situation. So, on behalf of AIOUG, that's the All India Oracle Users Group, I would like to welcome you for our weekly webinar series, which, as a reminder, happens every Wednesday. Today, we are lucky to have Bjorn with us, who will share his insights on the real application testing world. So a very warm welcome to Bjorn. Now, before I hand off to Bjorn, I would just like to remind you a few things. The webinar is being broadcasted on 2 channels, Zoom as well as YouTube Live. So spread the word, tweet about it, share the information with your colleagues. We really appreciate the help. The presentation will be shared with the registered participants. You can fill the survey form that we will email after the session and view the presentation. So please keep an eye on the inbox on your inbox for the survey link. For all your questions, there's a Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. Please use that and we will take the questions during our Q&A time. And at the end of the session, we will run an online quiz. So looking forward to your participation and let's see who wins the prize today. The last thing I'd like to say is, so we have this tradition of taking selfies during our sessions. So of course we can't take group selfies now, but I would like to encourage you all to take a virtual selfie, take a picture with you attending the session and tweet it to thank Bjorn for his time. You can use a hashtag AIOUG virtual selfie or AIOUG webinar and use AIOG handle or Bjorn's handle. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Bjorn. Bjorn, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Björn Boltoft. I'm working as consulting product manager at Oracle in the database manageability area. So that's mostly, so we cover diagnostic pack, tuning pack, real application testing, and a few other products as well. I joined Oracle actually about 25 years ago and been working with Oracle database version 6 and onwards. And mostly in the database DBA area. So I have good skills and been working with those products for several years and several versions. I joined the product management area 10 years ago and have been mostly working with real application testing and diagnostic and tuning. So can I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
Yes. So this session is about real application testing and mostly about my experience about using real application testing in different projects. So just for the knowledge, we have the safe harbor statement. So that means that the product can change, and what we say right now is how the product looks like today, but that can change in the future. So I will just go through real application testing quite short in what feature we have and what we have done in the last couple of releases, and then I will talk quite much about best practices and what we have done during certain projects and where we see the most benefits and the pitfalls that can occur. And at the end, I will talk a little about real world case study that we did a year ago, actually, right now. So where we help the customer to be successful using real application testing. So the benefits with real application testing, it's quite much about being agile and proactive with your applications and make sure that you can meet your SLAs when you do changes. You can adopt technology much faster compared to other situations. And if you want to move to the cloud, this is also a tool that will help you with that. So we're working quite much with what we call risk-free performance tuning. Make sure that when you do any type of tuning in your database, and that should be efficient, have good traction, and also not having any regression when you do that. We can, with real application testing, help you to ensure that the performance is more or less same or better when you do the changes. So that's predictable performance. And we also have in the tool a way to do capacity planning and make sure that the tool can help you what's happening if you either move to another platform, move to the cloud, or also if you want to make sure that what's happening if my application is increasing with users and workload, well, and still have a good assurance that your platform is working. And what we see and what we have done with other customers and done some measurement, we have seen that by using the tool efficiently, you have the possibility to reduce IT costs in quite dramatically. We see that if, for example, if you go in production and have an issue, if you don't fix that in pre-production or earlier, then the cost is about 100 times more to fix the cost in a production environment. That could be caused by everything that you see with the reduced uptime and everything. That's a cost as well. So what tools do we have available for real application testing? So we actually have Consolidation Workbench. This will in near future be rebranded, and Consolidation Workbench will be renamed as Migration Planner. So that's just a branding renaming. But the Consolidation Workbench, that's a tool where you can collect data from your different platforms and different databases. You can try to put database together on either your own hardware where you already have statistics for, and then it will do a calculation and see how your performance will be if you add those databases to that platform, or if you're going to move to the cloud or Exadata, XSCC, and those type of platforms. Then we can help you to predict the performance on the new platform. We have Spark Quick Check, so that's part of SQL Performance Analyzer, but it will help you in a production environment when you already running your application and want to do some minor changes, changing the init.dora parameter, that's the magic parameter for you. Then you can actually predict the performance and say that, okay, we see performance improvements here, but that will also have implications on this queries. And if that's the case, then we can use Tuning Advisor or Plan Baselines to fix that. When you do upgrades and adopting new features and other things, then we using the traditional SQL Performance Analyzer and database replay features. And that will help you to do a quite risk-free analysis of all your databases when you do the changes. So we have seen customers doing ROI on real application testing, and the payback period for some of those customers is more or less than a year. So we're talking about 6 to 12 months at least to have the payback. And it's about using all the features and see that, okay, I can fit in this on my existing platform, I can reduce a server, and that will reduce the cost. So, and if I still have performance issues, then I can identify the issues and solve that and make sure that when I go in production, I do not have any issues with that. So as we say, consolidation workbench, that's where you can either do a one-to-one consolidation, or you can do many-to-one consolidation and see how that works. We have the possibility to do consolidation into pluggable databases on existing or new hardware, or we can just do one database to one. And we will get information about if the memory is the bottleneck or if CPU or IO is the bottleneck. We can do different scenarios where we have a larger project and we can identify and say that take these 10 databases, 5 will fit on one server, 2 on another, and the 3 rest on a third server. And that will help you to do all your planning. So we will have the possibility to use constraints as if you have production databases and non-production databases as well. Secret Performance Analyzer, both Secret Performance Analyzer and SPA Quick Check, using the SPA engine in total. So what we do is that we using secret tuning sets, we analyze the result executing these queries with Secret Performance Analyzer, with the bind variables that we have collected in the STS. And we collecting the statistic, we validate the statistic, and then we do the change, and then we execute the same sequence again. And we get a comparing analysis. So the analysis will tell us if there are any regression or improvements. And of course, if we have regression, then we have the ability to interact with either secret plan baselines or secret tuning advisor to eliminate the regression and make sure that the queries perform minimum performance as they did in your earlier before you did the change. SPA Quick Check is implemented in Enterprise Manager, and we have several places in Enterprise Manager where you can see the validate with SPA Quick Check. And you have that in, for example, in init.aura parameters, you have that in the optimize the statistic gathering. And so there you can do all your analysis. Database replay, I think it's quite commonly that real application testing is often just equal to database replay for some customers, but the other tools are as important as database replay, and they can give you a faster response on your performance problem. But database replay, this is the tool where you actually recording your production environment. So you're recording all user activity in the database. You can add filters for that as well, just record a certain piece of the application, and then we take a clone of your database together with the recording to a test environment where we pre-process the workload and we replaying and analyzing. So database replay is a tool that can be used in quite many situations. Certainly if you do upgrades or if you want to adopt new features and do consolidation, that's a really good tool. You can also use it for scaling up the workload and see what's happening. If I have more workload than before, if I want to add a new unit to the database, then I can do the analysis and get quite risk-free analyzing. What we see here, so compared to other tools, this tool is quite much faster to use. And we really see the benefit of the tool. A project that I was working with a few years back were actually testing both load runner and database replay. And when they run load runner, there were no problem. When we run database replay, we actually identify 3 critical bugs in the system. One of those bugs was so severe that it would have caused the machine to crash totally. And that was because we using the real data, we actually exercising this larger amount of data than you often do when you're using load runner. In load runner, you have the same script that running over and over again, and you will actually not exercise the data in the same way. So let's just look at what we have done in the last couple of years. In SQL performance analyzer, one thing that we actually saw from some of the customers was that when using want to test, some customer want to identify if there are any type of changes in the result set as well. So previously we just had the way to see if there was same or less or more amount of rows from the query. But now we also have the availability to do a summarizing of any changes. So for example, if I have select sum of some values, then if there is a decimal rounding or something like that that's get wrong, then we will actually capture that. So what we actually do here is that we capture a hash value of the result set. And then we run the test again and capture new hash value and validate those. If there are any type of changes, then we will just flag that as a change, and you can do a more validation afterwards. But we do not have the possibility to store all the data is when we do the testing. So that's why we do the hash value testing. For database replay, we actually have enhanced the product quite much more. SQL Performance Analyzer was more easy. It was a tool that we actually have done few changes since it was actually introduced. But in database replay, we have added quite lots of new features. We started by 12c, where we had the ability to do consolidation. So now if you have the container database, now you can consolidate several pluggable databases and run separate replays against each of those containers and look at the performance. We introduced something we call subsetting. It's quite commonly that we see you want to capture a long time period, but when you do the replay, it's quite important to start small, and therefore we have the ability to subset the workload and do the analyzing in several steps, and then you can add on the workload. We also enhanced the integration with Ash Analytics and Ash integration. So when you actually replay, you will get more details about the replay and see that diagnostic, which queries that's slow and so on. Another problem that we have seen is long-running PL SQL. So if you have a long-running PL SQL, the thing that we did as a design decision in the beginning was we only captured the top level call to the PL SQL. So if there was anything that's like you had an if statement inside the PL SQL, say if Monday then do this. If Tuesday, do that. Then if we captured Monday and replayed Tuesday, then we had a different result. Now we have the ability to capture the first level of recursive sequence inside the PL SQL. And we can therefore replay those as individual sequels. That will eliminate some of those differences that you could see between capture and replays on long-running PL SQLs. It's also providing, but we still have the same functionality. So if you capture the first recursive level, then you can replay either top level or recursive level. And we actually see customers that using this feature to test PL SQL. A bank customer I was working with, they said that, yes, what we want to do is we want to implement new features inside the PL SQL for analysis of different customer settings and restrictions for customers. So now we have the ability to replay the top level recall, and we can see if there are any performance regression by adding the new analyzing. So you can either see this as good or bad. In 90C, we also added the possibility to capture and replay in pluggable database. Not so, it's quite commonly now that you just have access to your PDB, you are a PDB administrator, and then you should still be able to use database replay. This have been introduced in 90C. We see that we have some features still to work with. Replay clients have sometimes crashed, and we want to get that under control and make sure that they will not terminate the replay in that case. We will provide better hang detection that's provide you information. This is the reason for the replay to hang or get in problem. We will also implement something called in-flight session enhancement, which will provide you with information about session settings that was executed before you started the capture. This is something we can't do for the moment. We will support autonomous database soon. The problem with autonomous currently is that you do not have access to the file system. So that is something that we're working on. So let's talk a little about the best practices that we have. And here is an overview. So you should always plan your project, get to know something about your application, and so on. So capture workload and SPA. And if you follow these 12 steps, then you will be quite successful using database replay and SQL performance analyzer as well. So when we talk about planning project, I think there is a misconception. Mostly it's said that, okay, you can just capture and replay the workload. That's fine. Yes, this is what you do, but you also need to make sure that you have the right resources and everything available. So we used to say a lead time for the project is about 8 weeks. And that means that you need to get some information about the application, what you want to capture, and that could actually be that you capture a month ending, SQL tuning set, and things like that. And that should be, so you need to have quite lots of time in advance just to make sure that you can do all your tasks before you actually doing the replay projects. Some versions, if you still on 11.2 and 12.1 versions, then you need to apply patches on the replay side. And those patches have been created just because we have seen issues. So those are proactive patches. And we more or less say that you need to apply the patch, or we will not be able to help you with support either, because those patches have all the problems, the known problems. And if you try to replay and say that, okay, I have a problem, if you don't have applied the patch, then it might be included in the patch. Another quite important thing is the objectives of what you're supposed to test. So try to have a quite well-defined project. Since it's quite easy to do the testing, it's quite easy also to either expand or not testing what you really want to test. And if you're expanding, that will take time and will have problems with your testing. Same for the success criteria. What are the goal of the testing? Should I say that, okay, if I'm doing an upgrade, I don't want any regression, but where do I set the limit? Is it I want to have 5% improvements, or if it just to have the same performance? If I don't want to have issues, and what type of issues are acceptable, and so on. And then provide your time plan, because as we say, setting up the environment, I know that some systems, they are large. We're talking about 90 to 100 terabyte of databases that they want to test. If you want to clone that database, then that may take time. You need to have a server that can handle the workload. So you need to have those resources in place. Also, you need to have your environment with replay clients. So the total environment needs to be in place, and that can take time. Another very important thing is test one change at a time. So if you both migrating to new platform, upgrading the database version, and adopting new features, then make sure that you just test one changes. When you show that that change doesn't have an effect on the performance, then you can go to next. Otherwise, if you're testing all three changes in the same time, which one had improvements, and was there anything that regressed caused by the change? And that's something that you need to be very strict in when you do testing. We want to identify all those issues and advantages that's with the change. Another conceptual thing that we're talking about is you don't need to know anything about your application. This is something that we have seen quite commonly, and it's true to a certain bit, but not to the fully. So yes, you need to understand your workload, but you don't need to understand the keystrokes and how they actually using the application. This is something that we actually capture everything anyway. But so what you need to know is distinct workloads. Is there any difference between the weekend workload and the daily workload, Monday to Friday? Is there any month-ending things that you want to capture as well? And you also need to know, where do I have my peaks? Is that actually important to capture a peak, or should I just work with another time period? Is that which peak is more important? Is it the batch workload that's actually also peaking that needs to be ready within an hour or something like that? Then you should make sure that you have that included in the capture. Some applications do changes during logging. Siebel is one of those. So Here, if you log in, then it actually do all the session set optimizer, and that could have effect on the application. So we don't capture those if the user was logged in. So all new users will have the settings, but the users that was connected when we started the capture will not have those settings. So when you start the replay, those users will have a different optimizer mode set, and because that's the default in the database, and that can cause performance issues during the replay. Other restrictions that we have is XA transaction. When we capture an XA transaction, they actually quite commonly correlate two sessions. So one session do the insert, another session do the commit. And the problem with this is that we cannot correlate those sessions. We do not have the XA pieces included. So we will see the insert, but we will never see the commit. So for a long time, that data will probably not be committed in the database until there is a local commit on the first session. And that can have implication during the replay. So there are restrictions. We have said we do not support XA transactions, but this is something you can test and see what's the result is. We have replayed several workloads with XA with good result. We have replayed others with XA with quite bad result as well. This is same for distributed transactions. So we testing this database, we do not test other databases inside the scope of capturing a workload. If you do using bind variables for select and other things on a remote database, that will have implications that you will see. So we have in the testing guide, there are a chapter for workload capture restrictions that you can look at. Other things that's important is database backup jobs and everything. So you need to make sure that you you don't start a capture in the middle of a batch job or when you have a backup. We actually recommend not to run backups during the capture, because that will have, we do not capture the backup. You cannot run the backup from real application testing. You need to do that manually. In that case, you need to start a backup during the replay to get the same performance as well. DBM scheduler is background activity. So we do not capture background activity, and that's important. Some applications have quite lots of batch jobs implemented with DBM scheduler. In that case, you need to have the DBM scheduler running and run those jobs. But you need to make sure that, for example, if you capture starting 7 o'clock and you have a DBM scheduler job that's doing some processing of data between 7 and 8. And if you replaying the workload 9 o'clock in the day after, then that DBM scheduler job will not execute. So you need to make sure that you at least have those in line in some way. When you capture the workload, we really want to make sure that you capture the correct workload. And when we're talking about SQL Performance Analyzer, my recommendation is to capture distinct workloads into different SQL unit sets. The reason is that if you have a daily workload, so you're working from 8 to 5 o'clock in the day, and you do quite lots of activity. If you then have a batch job that's running for 10 minutes, the batch job is very important. You need to make sure that it doesn't take more than 10 minutes, because otherwise it will cause some other implications in the system. Then when we're testing with SQL performance analysis, we do a validation of impact on the workload. The impact on the workload for those 10 minutes will be much less compared to those 8 hours. And therefore, we will probably not see those SQLs in the top, but they are as important. So those needs to be validated separately. That's why I recommend to do distinct workloads into separate SQL tuning sets. Capture SQL tuning set from a time before you actually clone the database. I will go into that on the next slide, why you should do that. Database replay. So it could be different periods, and then you need to have a good understanding of what we capture and why we capture that workload. Should we capture more than one workload, or should we just capture a longer period of time? That's questions that you really need to get answered before you identify what to capture. Mostly, this is quite commonly that you capture peak time, but you could actually have different peak times. So you can have month ending. That's maybe a peak time for some parts of the application, while the daily activity between 10 and 12 is another peak. Time critical activity should be captured. This is where the subsetting really helps you. So if you capture longer time periods, then you can still just have one backup. You can have take those distinct workloads into different subsets and replay the workload. And if you have a very busy system, we do not recommend to start the capture in the middle of that busy, because there will be lots of in-flight session and transactions that will have implications on the quality of the replay in the end. When you capture, make sure that you have enough space. We have two ways of doing the calculations. Either you take your AWR report from a similar time period the week before, and then you, using the time period where you want to capture, take a look at the bytes received via SQLnet from client statistic, and you take that times 2. This has been very accurate in most use cases, actually, where you can see, because this is the data coming from the session, and this is what we really want to capture. Or you can do a short capture for just 5-10 minutes, and that you're throwing away, and then you do an extrapolating of that. So here is why you should capture SQL tuning sets before. So let's see, this is a time frame of 8 minutes or something like that. Then if you clone your database and you want to start the capture for database replay on T4, then we can look at how the application looks. So before that time period, we had actually inserted 2 rows in the database. We had 2 queries, and they were executed on customer number 1. Afterwards, we actually have customer number 2 and doing the same things. So the cloning of the database, that will, let's take this. So we start the SQL tuning sets, and if we do that by the time of when we capture for the database replay, then what's happening is that when we clone the database, the customer number 2 is not created, and order number 2 is not created, but the SQL tuning set will have both the queries using the bind variables of customer number 2, because we did not capture the sequence before. And that will, when we do the SQL tuning advisor, SQL performance analyzer run against that database? We will execute the query and the data is not present in the database. So that will be very low response time. It will probably go to the index and it will say that, okay, the row is not there. So that's a very short execution. So instead, what we should do is we capture for this time period, SQL tuning set. That's from T0 to more or less T4. And now the SQL tuning set will include the bind variables for customer number 1. And that's included in the clone of the database. So we will have the response time, and that will actually execute and take the time it's supposed to do for running the query. Another thing that we see is it's very common that you actually run SQL performance analyzer and or you should run SQL performance analyzer, but quite commonly that it doesn't, customer doesn't use SQL performance analyzer, and that will be a problem for the project. Mostly we see that those projects that doesn't use SQL performance analyzer, they will actually take longer time and the projects using SQL performance analyzer. We will detect optimizer changes. We will detect everything that have changed in the database, and you can actually do quite lots of analyzing and see, even if you're just changing the hardware, we will detect that and see that, okay, this query is running faster and slower. And if you're changing anything in the optimizer, then there might be queries that regress, and this can be found and this can be implemented using either tuning advisor profiles and SQL plan baselines. So SPA is a very important part. When you configure your database replay environment, then you should make sure that you size the environment correct. So first of all, the database where you're testing, when you're testing, you will actually run the same amount of users. So this database server should be the same size or better than the production environment. And if you're just testing an upgrade, then mostly it should be the same. But if you're testing new hardware, you cannot downsize the testing environment. Replay clients, that's the driver of the workload. They should be on dedicated servers. The binaries are included in the database binaries, but that's something that we need to make sure that they are on a separate server. Otherwise, they will take quite lots of resources from the database and it's difficult to see what's actually causing regression, if that's the replay clients or the database. And they're using CPU, memory, and storage. Networking should be more or less equal. It's actually more important to have the replay clients close, because we capture when we actually entering the database. So the further distance you have between replay clients and the database, even if the application tier is far away, then that can have implications on the performance in the replay. This is something that we see quite commonly. So this is you should not do anything. Downsizing the environment, you should not co-allocate the replay clients with the database or undersize the replay client environment. And you should not have the networking in different segments and too far away, because that will introduce delays on the system. When you clone the database, it doesn't need to be an exact copy of the database, but the more closer to when you start the capture, it's better. Some applications are more sensitive. Siebel is one of those. And what's happening in Siebel is they have something they call optimist locking. And that means that you actually using a some part of a status in the data. So when I inserting a record, the status is 1. When I'm updating, then I using status 1 in my update query. And the further away we get from the database there, the more data will be in different status. So instead of doing my second update that's changed to status 3, but using status 2, if my data is status 1 still, then it will not execute that query. So this is something that you need to be aware of. Good methods to cloning is RMAN, standby databases, data pump. Standby is really good because then you can get very close to the number. Data pump, test master, and snap clones are available as well. So when I do the replay, do I need to restart the database? The answer for that is, I would say no. You don't need to restart the database. We can see that in some places. Yes, please restart the database, but it's not necessary. There are, of course, some databases that the closer you are, the better it is. And as we said, with in-flight sessions in a Siebel, that could cause quite lots of implication. This could also be solved by using log-on triggers to make sure that the settings are correct. But that could also have implications on some sessions that should not have that setting. But you should look at optimize a change during login. Batch jobs, do not clone the database during batch log or long-running transactions, because long-running transactions will update lots of data, but that will be probably not captured, but the database should have those in when you do the rest of. Maintenance windows should be either turned off or make sure that they do not interfere. And try to start the capture in a quiet period. So instead of doing it in the middle of the peak, start it 1 hour before so it can ramp up. And you could actually there using the subsetting to say that, okay, I don't want to replay my first hour, but I want to concentrate on my second and third hour. So you can do that type of testing. We have different ways of doing synchronization in the database during the replay. So there have been 3 different methods. SCN, time is also seen as false in earlier releases. We had object ID. So the first thing is, which one is better? It's actually, you can't say which one is better. It depends on the application. Object ID has been deprecated. Most of those features have been incorporated in SCN. So SCN is much better working now than it did before. Time-based, that should be your first choice. You should always start to replay the workload in time-based. If the divergence is low, then you should keep to that, because that will be good enough. We have a couple of parameters where you can compress the workload, that think time scale and connect time scale. If you want to do that, the only option is time-based. System change number synchronization. We using the system change number as a sequence number during the replay. So that's should be seen, so it's not really the system number, and that doesn't have anything with the system number in your clone database. But that should be used when there are lots of dependencies between transactions, different sessions that's actually using the data. Then it is quite much important to use that. But it's also more sensitive to regression. So if you have a statement that's not tuned, that will cause issues in the database. So we have seen actually one customer, they had one single statement that was executed 3 times during a 30-minute capture. The statement was not tuned when they moved and took quite much longer time. So the replay took actually 4 hours instead of 30 minutes capture. And as soon as they tuned the SQL statement, then we were back to normal again. So you can see those type of implications. And it's quite commonly, so what's happening when you do the synchronization? Let's say this is a time-based synchronization. So you're running your application. This to the left, we have the production environment. It's smooth. There are lots of cars, but everything running in the database as normal. When you have any type of regression during a time-based synchronization, what's happening is that you get a traffic congestion. You will get more cars on the road because new sessions will connect to the database. And that will per se also increase the workload and regress SQL statements more. So that's what's happening. So try to make sure that all the SQLs are tuned before you actually go and do the database replay. That's one of the reasons for using SQL performance analyzer. SCN-based synchronization, still in the production database, we have the flow. But what's happening in SCN-based synchronization, if there is something slow, it will be a red light. Everything that's dependent on that data needs to stop. They cannot continue. So therefore, it's stopping. And then when you have green light, the transaction is ready, then you can continue. And you will see that stop and go. So actually in that type of replay, there will be quite lots of time where there are very little activity in the database. Another thing with the replay, so when you do the remapping, when you capture on one database replaying on another database, then you need to remap the connection if there is a different connection string. We can use a couple of different methods. Connection override, but connection override cannot be used in multi-tenant, since certainly not in 12C and to 19C, because you capture and you're replaying against the CDB. So the remapping should say that replay this against the CDB, but your connections should go to the PDBs in that case, and therefore there is a discrepancy. So that can only be used on single tenant database. Full connection descriptor. So you can either use the complete TNS names or TNS alias or all the data. And then you can use the TNS entry. This is the preferred choice with real application cluster. And the reason for that is that we've seen quite commonly that when you do replays, all the connections go to one node if you don't using this. And that's caused by the load balancing. So if you're using one connection string, then client server-side load balancing will execute those SQLs, send them to first node in the system. And that will, in that case, be a non-used. They just connect to that node. So all the sessions connect to that node. And then you start the replay. Now you're starting the workload. Now that node going to be utilized. So there will be quite lots of connections to the first node. So that's where we say that used both server-side and client-side load balancing. You can also omit load balancing and make sure that all the sessions go to the correct node. So that's to the same node as they were captured. Replays, start short replays. There will always be something going wrong. So if you start with a short replay, 30 minutes, that's something is helping you to iron out the issues and identify regression if there still are regression. A 30-minute replay, take 30 minutes or maybe an hour if there's a problem, then you have quite lots of time to reiterate that several times a day during the run. If you're running it 5-6 hours, that takes 12 hours. Then you need to work the next day with that and run new replays. So always start, and then you're ramping up 30 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours, and so on. We have the ability to do a query-only replay. So that's something that you actually should start with. It's omitting DDL, DML, PLS, PLC calls. It will have no synchronization, no locking, and nothing. So that will give you quite good information about how the database is progressing and working. It's also quite good to use that query-only replay to heat the cache during when you starting the replay for a normal replay. So you capture on a database that's been in production for weeks maybe. So the cache is quite having all the data, and you will probably have 5 to 10% new physical I/O to collect new data. But when you start the replay, then the cache is cold. So all the queries in the beginning will actually fetch data from disk. That takes longer time than from the cache. So that will in one way cause regression. So that's something that you should actually take care of. When you analyze the replay, so functional analysis is most important. Investigate all the errors, data divergence, and make sure that it's small. We more or less say that 80 to 90% of this call should be successful to be good. And if you are more than 90%, then that's really good. You are actually replaying 90% of the production workload. If you're using load runner, you may replay about 10% of the production workload. So that's one of the big differences. So you can also identify, see if there is divergence limit to few objects, what's causing that, and can look at background job and everything. And not before you actually think that, okay, my functional analysis is fine, then I can go to the performance analysis. Because if I need to understand what's 80 to 90% is and how that will cause the replay. So here, just short stop for the case study that we worked with. We had a hardware refresh from a customer, and it's from an Exadata X4, 96 threads, and they want to migrate to Exadata X7 and 88 threads. So it's actually newer hardware, less threads. And the database was 10.2, about 40 to 50% utilization on each node and about 11,000 concurrent sessions. So it's a large customer, telecom customer, and it was actually, they said that if we don't have the performance, we will lose revenue. So the questions they asked was, will the new hardware have, with less CPUs, have same or better perform response time, or same or less utilization? They captured the workload, they did a 2-hour recording, and they start to replay that on an X7 environment. And they just want to use database replay. So that was one of the first mistakes they did. Even if it was the same version, then we could have identified some of those issues that's caused by performance regression. And they said that we don't use it because it's probably the same platform, same database version, and the clone should be an exact copy of the database. The methodology was using snapshot standby. So they had a physical standby, they transformed that to snapshot standby and could do the replay continuously for quite time period. But they had to restore the database at least 8 days later, because otherwise it was not, they had to restore the database from scratch. We identify a few bugs during this. So the replay hangs, and we saw had a couple of patches and bugs that we fixed quite for them. And when they later replayed, we actually were able to replay 2 hours in 11 hours. Still issues during the replay. One of the top reasons here was replay divergency. It appears as the highest, and we actually found out that what they did was they used an old copy of the database, and therefore it was lots of divergency. So divergency caused by more or less all the transactions, and that increased the internal issues. We actually developed a new replay report where we could identify the top replay wait events, top replay queries, top replay sessions. And this is something that we're going to introduce and will be introduced in the later releases of real application testing. We had to ask them to use Spark Compare STS. And that was something that they had to collect in separate, because that's not included when you have a rack database. We started with query-only replay, and that helped us to identify those top sessions and top queries. We worked with the logon trigger to make sure that this was optimized for the Siebel environment with all the sessions. We tested different configuration, and actually none was really optimal, but the test configuration in the last example was the best, where we were able to isolate 2 of the nodes as replay clients and do the replay there. And we ended actually with a 3-hour replay, and that was, we succeeded, and we had actually 9 sessions that was containing just 0.5% of the calls that took more than 2 hours. We identified that these were the sessions that had wrong settings of the optimizer. So, and that was a little difficult to get that solved. So we actually just excluded those sessions, and we were testing that. So by removing those sessions, we still had a divergence less than 1%, but and the replay was 90% of the DB time. So here we had the replays, capture and replay. And we actually saw that we were able to replay the new data with a lower execution. So we were actually replaying with less than 90% of the capacity. And here is what we saw with the replay progress during the replay. We more or less had a good increasing, and then we just had it to drop off at the last hour. And we could see also that more or less 90% of the CPU was used during this, or all the activity was done within the 2 hours of the replay. So this was a success story for the customers. But of course, there were lots of things. So we have not done edit, real tuning and caching and available. So now they had to go back and do quite lots of those things. So they could enable flash cache and more things. So from that, we, from the real application testing team, were sure that we could leave this to the team that was doing the performance. I have collected some of my things here in a blog. So I have a Björn boltoftoracle.wordpress.com blog where you can see some of my experiences. Other information here is the testing guide. We have some bugs that you can look at if finding. So with that, it's time for Q&As.
Yeah, Björn, you can pick a couple of questions from Q&A panel.
Yeah. So the first question is about secret performance and analyzer and the licensing, and that's included in the real application testing licensing. So it's not a separate license. So next question is about the rat replay report. I'm actually writing a white paper on the replay reports right now, and will provide that. So that will be a link on my blog, and that will also be possible to download from or OTN in the future. I do not have a replay report available. It will take quite lots of time to go through all the details, but that there will be a white paper in the near future about that. So let's see, we also have the Q&A panel here. So real application testing is only it only works with the Oracle databases. It's working from, we actually introduced the capture features in 10.2, but we had to apply quite lots of patches to make that to work in 10.2, and since those versions are not supported anymore, we more or less say that you need to be on 11.2 to be able to successfully do a capture in the system. So there will be functionality that where for autonomous databases. Secret Performance Analyzer is currently going to be supported very soon for autonomous databases, and database replay will take more time just because both the capture and the replay needs to have access to file system, which is not possible in Autonomous for the moment. So, and as we said that this is a licensed feature. You license it for the capture environment. If you're replaying against Oracle Cloud, that's included in the licensing. Otherwise, you also need to license the test environment. That's something you should, but the test licensing is easier to recycle to other testing environments. So that's a more floating license in the test side, not in the production. So when you capture a workload, the production workload, we used to say that it's have an impact about 4 to 5% on the environment. And this is because it's using type of tracing in the database, but it's a very lightweight trace. And so we have seen customers doing large captures on 30,000 concurrent users, and we still keep that into 4 to 5% of overhead. If you capture in a rack environment, yes, you can capture 2-node rack and you can replay. So you can actually do the replaying with only one. So the transaction go to the correct node, same node as it did in the production environment. This is about the remapping of connections that needs to be done correctly in that case. When you do a standalone compared to rack capture or replay, there is actually not any major differences with that. It's the only thing that you need to be aware of is that the database needs to have access to some part of the capture directory, and that needs to be on both nodes. It could actually, for the replay, you can actually have that as separate directory, both for the capture and replay, separate directories with the same path because it's using a director object. But all nodes in the cluster needs to have access to that directory. Our recommendation is to use a shared directory if possible. That's more or less the only difference between standalone and rack. Source standalone rack target, no problem, that works as well. And as we say, we capture, so it's totally independent. The capture files, the replay client read the capture files. The database is only reading some metadata that's needed for the capture, so the replay clients know how to process and what to process and so on. But that's working without any problem. I'm currently going to build demos, video demos as well, so that will be available in both YouTube and it will be available from the OTN homepage, so you can look at it from there. We use OTube instead. That's Oracle Tube channel where we do the presentation, and I think that will in some way be applicable so you can access it. Capturing the performance on live. So I'm not really sure how to interpret that question, but we do not have any alerting in any way and during the capture, and the capture is in silence mode. So what's happening when you start the capture, it's more or less just flagging, telling the database that we are in capture mode. And as soon as a client is a user session do a new activity in the database, it will know that the database is in capture mode, and it will just start a buffer, a memory buffer, where it collects the statements and some metadata on those statements. And then as soon as the buffer is filled, it will do a asynchronous IO. So it will not impact the user in that case. So it's that type of activity. It will not be noticed anyway for users or anything.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and support. Hopefully, we'll see your next presentation very soon beyond. So, hi everyone. Thanks for attending the webinar. Please thank Beyond by tweeting or posting in Facebook and LinkedIn. You can use hashtags as in the presentation. We will send you a speaker survey to all registered participants. Please complete. It takes only 2 minutes. This is the only way we can understand your demand. For example, what topics you are interested, and also you are able to access the presentation after completing the survey. We also planning to host more HOL type sessions very soon. So your inputs are really important for us. So join our social media channels, especially Telegram group for learning and sharing the knowledge. That's very important. If you attend entire month webinar, for example, we run 4 webinars in this month, you are eligible to get a participation certification from All India Oracle Users Group. That way you can show to your organizations what time you spent on educational learning sessions. Now time for a quick quiz. Let me get into that page now. Okay, so you need to go to menti.com and use code 795003. Okay, so please join this quiz. It's going to be really funny, and also it will provide some, give some work to your brain. And also we will give you a gift voucher for the winner of this today. Okay, so I see people are joining. Okay, let's wait for 2 more minutes, I think, because there is a delay of YouTube live channel. So I think we're getting people now. So the code is 795003. Menti.com and use code 795003. Okay, getting 4 more people. I'll just wait for 1 more minute, then I'll start the quiz. Use your phones for really good experience, user experience, or if you can also use your laptop or desktop. Log into menti.com and use 795003. Okay, I'm going to start now. So how it works is answer the first to get more points. So I'll stop talking now. Time up. Wow. So we have only 8 correct answers. Okay. Let's go to the next. Let's see who actually in the leaders board. Yeah, we got Shobhit, and CP is actually on the next stage. So let's go to the next question. So remember, answer first to get more points. Okay, this time at least 12 people answered the right question. Who is in leaderboard? Oh, CP. That's a challenging now. Who's a CP? It's always good to give your full name, but we'll figure out. The third question. Oh no, this is not good. This light answer is the second one. Okay, this is the final. Okay, let's see who's in our leaders board. Okay, still CP is in leading after providing wrong answer. So the last question. Time up. Oh no, 9 correct answers. And here is a winner, I think. Wow, Rahul, congratulations. So this is what happens even if you're not leading, but still you're able to get into the winner position. So congratulations, Rahul, once again. If you don't mind, just provide your full name, Rahul, in the YouTube live channel. That way we can cross-check, and we will provide you the gift voucher very soon. So again, remember, you can thank Beyond by tweeting. So his last name at Oracle is the Twitter ID. Also, otherwise, you can go to AIOG Twitter channel and you'll find out. And also we will share this presentation to all the survey people. And see you next week. Let me share who's coming next week. That's more important and interesting, right? So we have our friend Anil is coming next week. He's going to talk about next generation Oracle Rack, and is on 6th May, 7 p.m. IST. Okay. Thank you guys. Thanks once again, Beyond, for your time and support. Hopefully we'll find another slot for your next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and hope to see you soon again. Thanks.
Thank you.